Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's the next installment of my regret or relief series. It's been a little while since I did this, but the whole premise of this series is to talk about eyeshadow palettes that I have decluttered and whether or not I miss them. Do I regret getting rid of them, or was it a relief to pass them on? If you've never been here, hey, my name is Rachel. I'm a homeschooling stay-at-home mom. I enjoy eyeshadow and I upload several videos every week. It's all eyeshadow related content, so I hope that you like what you see and you'll consider subscribing before you go. I did film today's look. It is linked down below in the description box. It's also carded above if you care to see it. And I also have a playlist for this regret or relief series. I think I've done 3 or 4 videos so far, so the playlist is linked below in the description box as well if you want to see the other videos talking about other palettes that I've gotten rid of and whether or not I wish that I had them back. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about some ColourPop, Sigma, BH Cosmetics, Nomad. I'm going to scoot over a little bit here and I'm going to put up pictures in the screen so that we can look at the palettes while I talk about them. Let's start with some ColourPop palettes. Now, when I first got into eyeshadow, I think I went a good 6 months where ColourPop was the only thing that I bought. So ColourPop tends to feature pretty heavily in this series because I brought in a lot and it is no longer my favorite formula, so I have let go of almost all of it. I think I currently own 2 ColourPop palettes. We're going to start off with the In the Limelight palette, which they launched, I think like maybe 2 summers ago. I don't know. It's been a little while. And I got this palette mainly because Angelica Nyqvist thought it was great. And I've taken a lot of recommendations from her and her preferences. Honestly, we have the same eyeshadow aesthetic, but we have different coloring to our own personal skin, like different skin undertones. So sometimes something that she loves doesn't work as well for me and vice versa. And that is something that's taken me time to learn. Now, I think that the In the Limelight palette is really cute. I wanted more limey eyeshadows because I was discovering that I loved green. So I got this palette and I did like the colors of it, but I found that it actually did not have the color payoff that I wanted. By the time I got this palette, I was to the point where I was much more comfortable figuring out what I liked, what I was looking for or hoping for in a palette. This one just didn't have the color payoff. And I think that is one thing where Angie and I, our undertones really came into conflict with one another as far as these colors worked better on her skin. She's a little lighter maybe, and her undertones are like a warm, I think she calls them warm golden, whereas my tones are cooler and blue. So it probably just comes down to that. I think the palette was nice, the packaging was fine, and I liked the color story. I think it was a good concept, but I found that I had to really dip in a dozen times to make 1 or 2 of these mattes show up at all. And then there were also, I don't really do monochromatic palettes anymore, so I was a bit bored because there wasn't a lot of variety. Now, it was cute, it just, yeah. I don't really regret it per se. If I still had it, I think I would probably use it, but honestly, I have colors like this elsewhere. Along the same line, we've got the Blue Moon palette, also from ColourPop. Now, Blue Moon is part of their monochromatic series. I think Limelight technically was not, because it wasn't in the same packaging and style as all of their other monochromatics, but it was kind of, But anyway, Blue Moon was part of their monochromatic series. It was one of the earlier ones. This Blue Moon palette, also purchased on Angelica's recommendation, was a really good blue palette, but I was learning again over time that even though I like blues, I have to be careful with blues because of my skin undertones. So I liked the quality of this one. I thought it performed really nicely. I did like the variety because there was a decent assortment of range in depth and kind of undertone, but still keeping within a monochromatic, it's blue. I don't know, I just didn't use it as much as I thought that I would. And Angie loves blue eyeshadow. It looks amazing on her. It's really, really striking because it's contrasting with the yellowy tones of her skin. Whereas blue on me is not contrasting, it's all sort of blending in. So if I'm not careful about the color selection, it makes me look weary and older and tired and kind of drab. When I do blues now, I tend to do bright blues over here because they pop more than otherwise. But anyway, this was a good palette. I just never used it. It was time to get rid of it because I didn't love the formula. As I've grown, I've come to use ColourPop less and less, and the color story was unvaried, and I didn't go into it. Let's talk about Nomad. I bought the Iceland Fire and Ice palette, and I liked the color story of this one. And honestly, this palette is really well reviewed by a lot of content creators that I watch. They just love this palette. I had trouble with this one. I thought the color story was really unique and interesting and different, but there was something about it that didn't draw me in. I didn't actually feel inspired by these colors together, and yet when I saw other people's looks, I thought they were great. But I wasn't getting that juice flowing myself. It was just the kind of palette that was sort of stymieing me. I'm looking at it going, like I can't quite land on the pans that I want to use. And then the other issue that I had was, this is Nomad's older formula. I really appreciate and enjoy the palettes that I have from them now, but this one I found to be very, very dusty, especially the shimmers. Like the mattes were better, I think, but the shimmers were really crumbly and dry. They didn't have much punch or shine to them. They were pretty colors, but I didn't get excited about using the palette or the looks that I got from the palette or the color story within the palette. So I don't regret getting rid of this one. I'm happy for the people who love it. I'm just not one of them. Beauty Bay makes one little appearance in today's video. This was the Midnight palette. Now this was released in a huge version of 42 pan, then they did a 16 pan, and then they did a 9 pan as well. I bought the 16, and I bought it because I love blue and purple together. I just do. They're beautiful together. I do think that they did a nice job with the balance, especially when they took the giant palette and they condensed it down to the 16, which I thought was a great size. They did a good job choosing light, dark, midtones, mattes, and shimmers. I think they did a good job balancing the 16 pan.
2,000 years later.
Honestly, I don't know why I didn't get much use out of this palette. I mean, I like the Beauty Bay formula. It's not my absolute favorite, but it is very solid. Like I said, I think they did a good job balancing this palette. They offered a nice variety of range and depth and texture. I really don't know. I can give you no reason for why this palette did not stimulate and excite me, why it didn't get use. I decluttered it, and I don't miss it. I do have a blue-purple palette in my collection now, which is the Winter Wonderland from Cosmic Brushes or Cosmic Beauty. And there's something about that one that it truly does excite me more than the Midnight palette. Maybe it's the formula, maybe it's the iridescence of the shimmers, because the Beauty Bay shimmers are not iridescent. They're very, maybe that's what it is. They're very physically heavy feeling. They're very thick. Winter Wonderland has more lightweight, iridescent, sparkly shimmers. My shimmer preference has definitely solidified more in the last year or so. So like I said, I got the palette and I just didn't use it. That's all I can say. If you spend much time on my channel, you know that I love the Oden brand, but I don't love absolutely everything they've ever put out, and I don't own everything they've ever put out. I do not have a collector mindset, and I try to stay away from getting or becoming a collector because I know that it would make me feel overwhelmed. I got the Solmone 2 palette. I thought that this palette was everything. And if you watch my videos on this palette, I'm like, if I were to create a palette, this is what it would be. It's just a beautiful combination of colors, tones, depths. I just loved everything about this palette. And then I gave it to a friend, or I sold it to a friend, I think. And honestly, I haven't missed it very much. There have been a few times where I've seen a look and I've thought, oh, that's definitely Solmone. There have been a few palettes that remind me of it, like the Simply Posh Cozy Cabin. I mean, come on. But anyway, the reason that I passed this palette along was because it worked so well in my brain. It was so expected that it didn't challenge me. It didn't pair odd colors together and make me go, ooh, that would be fun. You know, it wasn't, it made too much sense. I feel the same way about the Blend Bunny palettes when they have a gradient of colors. It actually makes me feel less creative because everything's just put together for you in a neat little package. And if that works for you, then you're golden, right? But I want to see jumbled colors that are next to each other that I never would have thought to put together, and yet they work. Or colors that don't work next to each other and they're odd. And I feel the challenge to make them work on my eyes. How can I take these polar opposites and meet them in the middle in a beautiful way? It tickles the creative side of my personality, and that is why the Solmone 2 palette and the Blend Bunny gradients don't work for me. They make me feel like I'm not excited, I'm not stimulated. The palette's beautiful, the formula, the color story, again, the undertones, so pretty and very flattering. I see gorgeous looks come out of this palette, but I just never played with it. I never grabbed it because there were other things that gave me more of a challenge, and that really was more appealing to me, honestly. Still is. Let's go back to ColourPop for another couple minutes here. I want to talk about the Ornate and the Baroque palettes. These were part of their Dark Blooms trio. I didn't get the third one, which was Grandeur. I didn't get Grandeur. I think really with this one, it was the packaging that caught me. Oh my goodness, the packaging of this Dark Blooms collection was really beautiful. It was just moody, floral, elegant. It reminded me of these old floral paintings you might find in grand houses. So, so beautiful. If I had these now, the difficulty would be keep them for the packaging or actually use them. And knowing myself and knowing my preferences, I basically don't really use ColourPop shadows anymore. I like their other products. I like some of their lip and face, their eyeliner products, but I just don't care for their shadows anymore. There are so many other formulas that I prefer. So if I had them now, I would keep them for the packaging, I think, honestly. I really think I would, but I would have to force myself to use the shadows. Not the case for these next two ColourPop palettes. We've got Miss Bliss, and we've got the Whatever palette, and I'll just talk about them together because they're both ColourPop. So Miss Bliss was also part of a collection. It was like a pastel collection. I liked the collection. I thought the undertones were really different, especially for ColourPop. They weren't quite as expected. These palettes each had a glitter in them, which was not my favorite thing. And again, kind of along the lines of monochromatic. It was like, if you want that one color, you've got that one color in spades. But I didn't feel that I needed an entire 9-pan palette of that one color when I could have the color represented in other palettes scattered among other colors. So that's why I ended up decluttering this one. I also really dislike the plastic packaging, which was in Blue Moon as well. Sometimes they were broken or they didn't click right, or the pans would pop out and fly everywhere. I just didn't like the packaging. I'm glad that ColourPop is now in the cardboard packaging. And then the Whatever palette I bought really early, really early. This was on a recommendation from Judy, I think, because I watched a lot of Judy's videos in the very beginning. So the Whatever palette was kind of like terracottas and reds and very harvest sorts of tones. Very pretty. I think if I had it now, I might keep it for the colors. It also, I believe, had 1 or 2 pressed glitters. I really dislike the packaging. I don't like animal print. There's one thing I own that's animal print, and it's a little scrunchy, and I wear it sometimes if I'm in just the right mood. But I don't care for animal print, and the Whatever packaging just felt very discombobulated. It didn't jive with me. I didn't use the colors a lot. It was also quite early in my journey, so I wasn't nearly as experienced to know how to use the colors, and that's why I say maybe if I had that palette now, I might use it more because I know what I'm doing now when I didn't then. But still, it's not enough for me to miss it. Let's talk about Sigma. I have owned 2 palettes from Sigma, and the one that we're going to talk about today is the Untamed palette. I got this one because I wanted something a little bit more neutral, a little bit more wearable. This one was a little bit tricky for me. I know that Sigma is high quality, and it's a good brand, honestly. They're well reputed, they're well established. People seem to love Sigma, but I found in owning 2 of their palettes that I don't love their eyeshadow formula. I don't dislike it at all. Honestly, I do think it's very good quality, and the final result when I wear Sigma is a nice, refined quality look. It's really more a matter of working with the shadows. I think that the mattes tend to overblend. I put them down and I start to work a little bit and they're everywhere. And I just prefer a matte that is a bit more grippy. Like Oden's Eye, I want my matte to stay in one spot and then I'll just soften the edges because then I can really control where it goes. I didn't get that with Sigma. I didn't enjoy working with the formula, and the shimmers did not give me the kind of sparkle that I want. Again, they're classy and they're elegant, but that's not usually what I'm going for. I do want some sparkle. And then also, I can't stand the texture of velvet, and this palette packaging had like velvet stripes, like the claws of an animal and stripes. And I just didn't like touching it. I didn't want to hold it. Do you guys remember when BH Cosmetics was putting out great palettes? Now, I did use a BH Cosmetics palette today. I used the good old Blueberry Muffin palette for half of today's look. The quality is so amazing. It's sad what happened to BH, but you know, it is what it is. But this is the Summer in Saint-Tropez palette. This was given to me by a subscriber, and I did really like the color story of this one. I thought that it was, again, I didn't have many neutrals, so this was a nice neutral option for me. Obviously, it had some pops of color, but it was much more heavily neutral. I really liked the quality of this. I ended up passing it along because, again, I wasn't stimulated, I wasn't excited by it. When I wanted neutrals, I was more likely to go into a palette that had neutrals with more interesting undertones, or that had neutrals with really interesting pops of color, because again, it challenges me to do oddball combinations and see what I can do. This palette was really good formula, and I know that a lot of people loved it because someone who loves neutrals is going to find great value in something like this with the variety and the undertones and the cools and the warms. I did think it was nice. I don't miss it, but I think that if I had it, I would probably find some more use for it than I did before. And finally, I would like to talk about the Aurora Struck palette from ColourPop. Okay, so this one really tripped me up. When they revealed this palette, I was awestruck. I thought it was just so beautiful, so well done, absolutely gorgeous. Love the theme. I think the packaging is beautiful. And with ColourPop's mega palettes, this is the only one where I thought the packaging was beautiful. Then the colors on the inside with the cool tones, the grays, the silvers, the cool blues and purples and teals, a little bit of depth, a lot of lightness, and some really lovely shimmers. I bought this palette brand new, which I very rarely do, and I was very excited for it. I didn't use this palette as much as I thought that I would, and I actually think that that comes down to not so much the color story, a little bit of the formula, although I went into it knowing that it was going to give me more downplayed, softer looks as opposed to really in-your-face kind of looks. I went into it knowing that, and with every intention of enjoying softer looks. I think that I didn't use this palette as much as I planned to because I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed with everything that I had, and maybe I wasn't doing a great job of balancing, so I ended up passing this one along, and I do kind of regret it. I think that now, especially as over time, your preferences change, your desires change. So now I am starting to enjoy slightly quieter looks. It's not that I don't love color, I still love color, but I want it to be a little bit more controlled, a little bit more reined in, just a little bit. And that's not all the time, but it's something that I'm beginning to appreciate more than I ever did before. So now I'm thinking the Aurora Struck palette gave me the beautiful colors that I love, colors that work well on my skin tones, but softer versions of those colors, not too pigmented or hyper bright or bold or saturated, just a little bit downplayed. So I do kind of regret getting rid of my Aurora Struck palette because I still absolutely love the packaging, still love the color story. I think they did a good job with that color story. Oftentimes their mega palettes are pretty redundant, and I didn't think that this one was. This one did offer a nice selection. There was one shimmer in here that was just so striking. It was called High Latitude, and the rest, they were pretty. They were pretty. My only qualm with this palette was that it didn't have a matte purple. I mean, it's begging for a matte purple or three. But yeah, I do kind of regret that one. There you have it, guys. Those are the recent handful of palettes that I wanted to talk about, whether or not I regret passing them along. A couple I do, but on the whole, once I've passed something along and it's out of my collection, out of my brain, I have room to play with what I love. And I also, taking into consideration why I got rid of something, I am more careful when I bring in new things. I don't really regret the process. I think it's very helpful. But sometimes I'm a little hasty in getting rid of something that is kind of working but not working to exactly what I want because my tastes might change. Like Aurora Struck, my tastes may change over time and I actually might enjoy it more at a later date than I did before. So there has to be a balancing point. I don't want to hold on to everything with the expectation that at some point I might start enjoying it. But I also don't want to be so strict and stringent with myself that I jettison everything that's not working in the moment, and then at some point I might have a bit of remorse wishing that I could enjoy that item again. So thank you so much for being here. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you have any of these palettes, do you love them? Tell me your favorite ones. If you used to have them, why did you get rid of them? I love to talk to you guys in the comments. I so appreciate your time. Thank you for being here and for giving me a bit of your day. I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. Like this video, you know how it goes, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.